What celebrities have you encountered that were either really nice or really horrible? My mom and sister met The Rock when he was still a wrestler. They had a couple car seats and tons of bags, having a hell of a time getting off the plane, and people were waiting, and then this massive guy offered to carry some things for them and they happily took the help. He grabbed some bags and held the baby carrier with my niece in it and helped them off the plane and left. After, people kept going up to them asking how they knew The Rock, and they were very confused until someone explained who he was. Met Dave Chappelle a few years back. Long story short, a friend of a friend got me and two friends into an after party. We were sitting at the bar when his manager offered us some shots. We talked with his manager for a while. Then Dave sat down near us. Dave was kind of sitting by himself and he looks over at us and goes, "What's going on, fellas?" And we talked to him for about an hour. We thanked him for coming to our town, talked about music, sports, all kinds of stuff. Super cool dude. One of my favorite memories. I served Daniel Radcliffe as dessert at an event and tripped and spilled some of it on him, probably due to seeing that I was serving Daniel Radcliffe, and he stood up and started apologizing profusely to me. Was very sweet and asking if I was okay. I met Vin Diesel at a truck stop diner when I was a kid. It was like 4 in the morning and me, my grandpa and Vin and his friend were the only ones in the diner, and we ended up getting sat at the table next to them. Vin and a friend were getting ready to go on some fishing trip, which was made obvious by the clothes they were wearing. My grandpa struck up a conversation about fishing with him, completely oblivious to who he was. He was a really nice guy and apparently knew a great deal about fishing techniques. I was a bit geeked out and didn't say much or contribute to the conversation, but I spent the next hour of our road trip explaining to my grandpa who Vin Diesel was and why it was a huge deal we just met him. When I was a teenager, I met Neil Armstrong at a retirement ceremony that my dad brought me to. It was at a museum and it was a private event. There was time for everyone to wander the museum, and my dad saw Mr. Armstrong looking at one of the planes that my dad helped design. Nobody else around. They struck up a conversation and Neil asked me questions about what I was studying and how I felt about the work my dad did. My dad worked on classified planes when I was much younger. He seemed like such a gentle guy to me. A bunch of other men suddenly joined us and started asking him for autographs, which he declined. It seemed to snap him out of his happy mood, and he kind of shut down and walked away. At that time I thought he was a bit of a jerk for not saying goodbye or anything, but I recently read about the hard time he had with fame, and I guess it makes sense. Was a server for Tom Cruise. Pretty cool dude, TBH. Was a bit out of touch, but that's to be expected. The funny part was he didn't know what he could order off of our menu, so he had to call his nutritionist to find out what to get. Ended up getting fried chicken. Used to do delivery runs for a catering company, and we would get a lot of celebrities at the airport that ordered from us. Johnny Depp was the only one I ever saw face to face. Dude pulled a wadded up bill from his pocket and tossed it at me. I thought it was cool I got a tip directly from him at all, but once I had it all unwadded it was $100 bill. When my dad was about 9, 1964-ish, he was on a plane from LA to Heathrow in coach with his mom. The stewardess came back and excitedly asked him if he wanted to meet a Beatle. My dad said sure, but didn't really know the Beatles at that age, and only said yes because that's kinda what you do at that age. He sat on the couch next to George. Different time. Airlines treated you like people. George folds up his newspaper and says, "Sue, do ya like my music?" My dad says, like a confused 10-year-old, no. Apparently George smiled and went back to reading his newspaper. My dad sat there like a doofus for like 5-10 minutes until the stewardess came and got him. So George Harrison was cool to children, and my dad's the most stone cold 10-year-old ever. Bumped into Gordon Ramsay in the lift in a hotel in Hong Kong. He was very friendly. We didn't talk to him or ask for a picture. I just blurted out, "You're Gordon Ramsay," and he acknowledged and smiled. He insisted on us going first because we had our suitcases with us, wished us a nice day, said bye several times when we saw him in the lobby again. Very friendly. I had a chance to work with Whitney Houston for 8 days on a film set. I was working as an extra. She was nice, kind and personable. Her beauty was more striking in person. She was very professional. She did not miss a mark or a cue. Everybody on the set cried when she sang. Whitney Houston was very nice to me and complimentary. She spoke sweetly and in a motherly tone when she greeted people. I can still remember her friendly greetings when she arrived on set every day. That was one of best experiences of my life and best experiences working on a film set. I learned a lot from her about professionalism on a film set. I also saw how hard she worked. She was there 12 hours a day and on point every minute. I watched how she interacted with the director, other actors and crew. She was even encouraging to other actors and performers in the film, even the extras. It was heartbreaking when she passed. I still have the dress that I wore in that film. She admired and complimented me about the dress. An actor-musician I know was booked to perform at the event Whitney Houston was to be at the day she passed. He was also staying at the same hotel. He called me and told me she was gone, then he started to cry. Ewan McGregor accidentally ran over my BF's foot a couple of years ago when he was filming his Long Way Round series. He was absolutely lovely though. My BF loves bikes, so he was over the moon, bless him. Apparently they talked about his GS for a couple of minutes together. Apparently it's one of his favorite memories. He had to restrain himself a little from roasting the GS as they are notorious for their unreliability. After college, I was living the intern life in New York, so I had to hunt around for a job that would be fine with me working just evenings. The first call I got was Kmart, so for about a month, I worked at Kmart Penn Station. One night, this guy with his hat pulled down low and this really cheerful girl came into the electronics department where I worked. It was a wild store with tons of sketchy characters, so right away I was wary of him. Anyhow, they looked at the game selection for a minute, then the girl asked me if they could get Madden 2013. I obliged, took it from the case and began cashing them out. It was over the $50 minimum where I had to ask for ID with a credit card purchase, so I asked the sketchy fella for his ID. He told me, in this hushed little voice, that he didn't have it with him. MHM. So I called up security to get the okay to finish up the transaction. As I'm talking to them, he tilts the credit card towards me. My first thought is, I didn't know JP Morgan made a credit card, and then I looked at the name. Daniel Radcliffe. His girlfriend was beaming at me as the expected recognition washed over my dumb, tired face. He was super gracious, and my height, which I loved even more. We're both a firm 5'5" inches dart. And, I was pleased to be so calm and collected about the whole thing that they both got out of there without anyone else knowing who he was. My mom met Bob Marley outside of a concert out of pure luck. Her friends had already left without her and he got a security guard to drive her home. Years later, her best friend gave my mom a signed poster that said he hoped she was doing good and had better friends. Edit. Holy shit, that's a lot of likes. Thanks. Drake Bell came to my college last year and played guitar. He was big when most of us were grade schoolers, but he does next to nothing now. His musical skills weren't bad, but he did a terrible show because he said nothing between songs. Despite the fact that he's now touring small, rural colleges, he was a royal jerk to all of us. Zac Efron is the nicest guy in the world. I met him at a New Year's house party in LA. I asked him about his workout regime for Neighbors and he was so happy to talk to me. I honestly felt so comfortable talking to him. I could have asked him to get me a drink at the bar and I think he would have done it. In the end, I told him he was the nicest celebrity I have ever met. He looked at me and said, "Hey man, real recognizes real." Tom Hanks, absolutely nice. I met him when I worked at an In-N-Out Burger a few years back. I took an order to his table and Amp was startled when I saw him and Amp. I asked, "Are you Tom Hanks?" and Amp. He looks up from his meal, gives the biggest friendliest smile and Amp says, "You betcha," when I'm clocking out and Amp leaving. He's heading out exactly as I am, so I hold the door open for him. And Amp, he greets me with a "thank you." And Amp, as he and Amp, his son, are walking away, I say, "MR. Hanks, if it's not any trouble, could I possibly take a picture with you? He turns around with another big grin and amp. Says, walk with me, kid. So we talked for about 10 minutes. He asked me about my life. Told him all of my favorite movies he is in. He gave me some life advice and amp. His son, very nice but just quiet, took some pictures of us. He gave me a handshake followed by a hug saying it was nice to meet me. I said I'm glad the most famous person I got to meet was you. Then they left. Needless to say, my co-workers stared through the windows the entire time and amp, then hounded me for a week about it. I met Bill Clinton at a book signing in DC right after he published Back to Work around 2009. He took about a minute with each person, which seemed very generous considering how many people were there. What really struck me was how mentally sharp he was. He was speaking with the woman before me, who was an astrophysicist, about string theory. I don't mean that he was passively listening to her describe her field, he was engaging in brief conversation about it at more than an introductory level. In less than 60 seconds. When I walked up, I explained I was getting the book signed as a gift for my friend, who was getting a PhD in political science and studying, at the time, whether and how genetics affects political bias. President Clinton immediately switched to talking about some really interesting studies of twins and other minutiae in that field of which I was vaguely aware from having conversations with my friend. He seemed like a nice, genuine guy who knows a little about everything and can easily get along with anyone. I guess that's why he was a good politician, strictly speaking, regardless of your own views of him. Samuel L. Jackson at the Calgary Stampede in Canada. He was super nice. My family went up for it because my uncle is part of the committee that organizes the Stampede every year and he got us VIP seating. I was a kid at the time and I was like, does your wallet really say OBAMF? He laughed and said he left that one at home. Of course, when I told the story at school, I told everyone his wallet did in fact say that. I met Tony Hawk at a local skate park. Just randomly he showed up. Of course people were freaking out, but he was such a laid back guy. Shook my hand and made small talk with me, a real nice guy. A couple years ago, I ran into Skrillex in a public rest stop in Maine. He was doing a show later that night in the area, but for obvious reasons, I thought the restroom was a bad place to try to say hello. By the time I got outside, he was already on his tour bus. I'll always regret that, lol. Met Jake Gyllenhaal at stage door after his play off Broadway last February. I was super nervous BC, he's my favorite actor and had heard stories of him not being nice. We said hi and as he was signing my playbill, a lady shoved in front of me and demanded he sign her playbills for her daughters and that she just has to get a photo. He looked so uncomfortable and kept looking back at me, but he signed them anyway. I'm only 5'3" and was 17, so I just let it happen because I hate confrontation and was a little starstruck by Jake. Well, he told her off and said, you're going to have to wait because I'm going to spend some time talking to her, points to me because you cut her off. He then turned so he was fully looking at me and he apologized to me for her behavior. I just about died. We had a short conversation about his work, I thanked him profusely, and we took a photo. I have so much respect for him for handling the situation so well and all of my nervousness completely evaporated. James Corden. I was a porter at a hotel a very long time ago. He'd had a couple of very minor TV roles. I had no idea who he was but others did. He came down in the morning yelling at the receptionist that someone had taken VHS tapes from his room. He demanded to know who had access to his room, me being the only person on duty that night with a master key was pointed out, and he proceeded to accuse me of sneaking into his room while he slept and stealing tapes. After 10 minutes of verbal abuse and threats, one of his people came in and told him they found his tapes in the car and he stormed out with so much as a goodbye. Truly horrible human being. Back in 2004, my mom took me on a trip to LA to do some shopping for my 13th birthday. We went to Rodeo Drive just to look around at all the fancy stores, and when we popped into Louis Vuitton I saw Nikki Hilton along with her bodyguard. Now, being a teenage girl in the early 2000s, I absolutely loved the Hilton sisters and Nicole Richie. I went up to her and asked if I could get a picture with her and she said yes. My mom got out the camera to take a picture when the sales staff came running over telling us we couldn't take pictures inside the store. I was pretty bummed. Nikki then asked me if I'd like to go outside and take a picture with her. I was so excited she dropped everything just to go outside and take a picture with me. We take the picture and talk with her for a few minutes before going our separate ways. She was so kind and very soft spoken. Nothing like you'd read about her and Paris in the tabloids. It made my birthday for sure. Jeffree Star. Accidentally walked too close to him, his bag at a concert and amp. He nearly broke his neck to say watch where you're ducking going bitch. Taylor Swift. She was about 16 at the time and just started getting popular. I was at a store with my mom and in my supreme 6-year-old intellect told her that she was fatter viral than on album covers. Impressively enough she explained it without missing a beat and took it like a champ. I know you're not reading this but sorry Taylor Swift. I had the pleasure of meeting actress Carrie Fisher at a speaking engagement at College of St. Catherine in St. Paul, Minnesota in October 2006, sponsored by the Guild of Catholic Women and Guild Incorporated, a local mental health non-profit. I found her to be both remarkably candid and a bit self-deprecating about her struggles with bipolar disorder and chemical dependency. After the lecture, I stood in line for 2 hours to get a couple of books autographed. While I must have talked her ear off about writing and my own struggles with bipolar disorder, she was very kind and sincere. I loved it when she said, "Now I get awards for being mentally ill." Apparently, I'm very good at it. I met Drake while working security in a hospital. He came in after hour, and there is a procedure for after hours that requires everyone to sign in. He came into the building and just walked in without even saying anything, so I made him sign in lol. I've never seen someone so mad in my life. He kept saying does she not know who I am, and I said no with a straight face I could make. 10/10 for me. I hang out with Queen Elizabeth every summer for about 30 minutes. She is keen with my father as they both are into horse racing and I get to go up and sit with her 40 at the races. She is one of the nicest ladies I have ever met. Picture an old grandma talking to you with a very sweet and caring voice. Also had a conversation with Rod Stewart at the races and did not even know who he was. He came up to me on a balcony and we were both looking down and some girls were pointing up, obviously looking at him. And he said, "Wow kid, all these girls must be really into you." I kept talking to him for about 30 minutes and he ended up having to leave, and my dad came up to me and was like, "Do you know who you've been talking to?" I responded I had no idea, and he was trying to explain to me, but I was 13 and had no prior knowledge of rock music, and now he turns out to be one of my favorite artists. I met Snoop Dogg in 2006. He was just wandering around the now defunct Hard Rock Casino in Vegas, being followed by 2 large men. My buddy I was with walked up to him and put his foot near Snoop's heel. He looks back and my buddy tells him to "Take a step sir," and there was a tiny piece of tissue paper that had been on his heel. So Snoop gave us both hugs and told me, "You have always been there for me." Then he and his entourage walked off. Strange experience for sure. Met Neil deGrasse Tyson at an astronomy lecture at the Natural History Museum. There was a guest lecturer and he introduced the lecturer and then stayed after to answer questions. It was a small group of about 5 people and me, and he stayed as long as we had questions. He was also very willing to pose with me for a selfie and did his signature pose with me. Very nice man, but I know other people have had bad encounters with him.